Okay, so if we are putting this on a building, sometimes I will just sort of stick them on like this and I can get away with sort of texturing this. But if you did want to cut holes into the building, I do recommend kind of coming up with a template. And this I basically just moved and placed it very loosely on the back here. You could always hit D, hold V, and snap your vertice to basically the furthest sort of vertice that's kind of on the back there, and then that would allow you to just very gently kind of place it against the wall. So for openings, if you do want to place an opening and recess this and have a window well, we would call it, I pretty much would just start by selecting these two edges and going to connect. The reason I like connect is that it's very clean, it's very accurate. So I take this and then go to maybe bevel with one segment in this case, and then sort of set my width approximately. Yeah, I will probably add a middle segment just so I can eventually cut in the walls. Then I'm going to select around, and usually I use kind of like two lines for, so again, I could connect or multi-cut. It doesn't really matter in this case. So if I go to multi-cut, right, we can kind of control click. So this could be like where the windows generally will sit. So let's say this loop will be kind of roughly where the windows sit, right, for the framing purposes. Same thing up here. Okay. So I'll take the vertices in this case on this window and drop them. I think I also need to narrow them a little bit, so I'll just double click these and scale them inwards a bit. So scaling kind of keeps things nice and centered to the window. I'm going to isolate this object too. So I'll go to vertex mode and I'll go to chamfer if I can, or yeah, maybe I'll take this edge for now. Bevel. And I'll just kind of crank the segments here. And the fraction, let's up the fraction a bit. Okay, so these don't need to be kind of split into all these points down here. So I'm going to basically just collapse these to the center. And if you have any excess vertices, we'll delete them. These over here, I'm just going to kind of scale them out. Maybe scale them a bit higher. Make sure we don't get our triangles kind of going through here. Okay, so I'll get it to isolation mode, right? So I know that edge is basically covered by the frame, okay? So now if I take these faces here, just hold tab, shift drag in, right? Now you've got yourself essentially a window well, right? Now, what's useful about this is I would probably keep this or maintain this as a kind of this whole section. So I'm going to expand this. I'll do shift greater than to expand this out. So I might just take this whole section minus this piece here, and I could kind of copy paste this into other areas, okay? So I would probably right click this, go to duplicate faces. I'll make this a separate object. So now if I needed that window, sorry, let me just find the duplicate here, right? So if I need that window, again, I'll hit D, hold V. I usually just snap to a corner vertex, hit D again, right? So if that window had to be somewhere else, let's say on this wall, I'm going to move this over. Let's turn on the wireframe for a minute. Hold V, snap to there, rotate, okay? So now what I would do is try to kind of create a space. So you want to line up these edges. So I basically have 1, 2, 3 edges on the border, and these will line up here. So I'm going to go to edge mode on this house, connect, bevel with 3 edges, and basically up the fraction to roughly match. Doesn't have to be perfect, but it can be sort of close. Okay, so I'll slide those into position. Then essentially I will delete those faces on this side, okay? And so next I'll select this and then combine these together, okay? So what you can do, which is useful, is to use target weld. I use it on edges, but you can use it on vertices as well. It's sort of very useful either way. So I'll essentially kind of weld these together. And I want to sort of weld to the window well because that's sort of fairly accurate and is related to my geometry. In this case, these two verts seem like they're very close to each other, so I'm just going to probably merge them without too much of an issue. Okay. So again, very, very useful, right? And then if I take this piece, shift, click and drag, rotate 90 degrees. Oops. Slide that over and in. turn off the wireframe there, right? So we start to see a fairly decent kind of layout of this house. One other thing I wanted to mention. So again, you want to sort of template. I often use the base of the model as a template to sort of create new pieces. So when I create one piece, I'm not going to recreate it. I'm going to kind of like optimize one little section, duplicate it, and then reuse it and reuse it. One thing I forgot to do is maybe create more of a curvature in this area of the house. So just to show you something else you can do. There, edge mode. Okay. If we, let's say, click on these edges, if I wanted this to be more rounded, there's a couple ways to go about this. One way is to just double click the edges, hit Control B bevel. Oops. Control B bevel, there we go. And if you increase the segments and the fraction, which is the spacing, you see you get a nice rounded section there, right? So that can be very, very useful. It does look like it kind of gets flat in the corner here. So what I might do just prior to this is I might just add a little extra edge. By the way, when you add edges, if you notice, if you kind of click in, it keeps the edge on a flat part of that polygon, right? There is a little function. So if you double click on your multi-cut tool, there's something called edge flow. It's also in the modeling toolkit, which is that little cube with the hammer on it on the right side. Edge flow over here. Okay. What that will do is kind of detect that there's a curvature here. So now if I go to drop this in, watch what happens. Oops, will it do it? You see how it pops it out? So it'll actually try to sort of estimate or guess that, hey, there's actually a curvature that you want to maintain. So I really, really like that function. I think in this case, it's having a bit of problems because of the corner. So I might just manually have to pop this out a little bit more, which is okay. I don't mind doing that in this case. So I'll just fix that in here. Just keep in mind to turn that function off, because there are other times when you absolutely do not want that and it can be more distorting. So but yeah, I might now take these, and just to get, again, a little bit more smoothness, I could take these and do another bevel on these. So bevel a bit more, increase the fraction. And I would also caution you against kind of overlapping. You don't want edges too close together or too far apart. So maybe just dial in your distancing so it's fairly equally spaced as much as possible. And if you do get any edges too close together, I'll usually delete the kind of duplicates, or you can merge the vertices as well. That sometimes works okay. So for example, if I took this, shift click through here, and I can go collapse edges, and that kind of heals up that sort of strange gap. Okay, so we have a rounded area. Yeah, same thing with these windows. Like if I did want to put a rounded window like this, I would need to increase the poly count on this frame, mainly because if I just center this, I'll center my pivot and show you with the deform tools, nonlinear bend. I think by default it's sort of vertical, so if you go to curvature and bend it, it'll do that. But if you go into the rotation tool and rotate 90 degrees on Z and then on Y, you see you get curvature. So the top part is working fine because there's lots of edges up here, but it's not working well down here. So in that case, you might need to, if you have to put a window on a curvature, increase the poly count down here. So again, I would recommend taking this this curve. Looks like I have some weird little duplicate vertice issues there, so I'm going to just try to fix that quickly with a merge vert. Okay, there we go. Yeah, still a bit of a problem for some reason, but yeah, maybe I'll just try multi-cut instead. So I can kind of put additional edges. Yeah, this is where like this edge loop thing is not working great, right? So edge flow, I should say. So I'll turn that off, and yeah, it looks like part of the frame is disconnected, but I'm not sure why that is. Let me just double check something here. Could have been an error in the merge, in the mirror, sorry. Anyways, if you get issues like this, it can be useful to, yeah, sometimes I'll just select all verts and go to merge verts, just in case there's any like little disconnections, which I can't quite tell if there is or not. Yeah, I'm just going to increase that threshold a little bit. I think that'll be better. There we go. So yeah, now if I double click the loop, hopefully it should go through. If not, I oftentimes will go to clean mesh too. If there are errors, again, Maya is, I feel like it is kind of error prone. So I will often turn on these options under mesh cleanup for this. Basically under the remove geometry, I'll activate everything but faces with 0 map area, and that mainly will hopefully isolate and find and fix some of the problems in here. Yeah. Okay, anyways, we'll move on to some other stuff here. So, you know, people often ask how do you deal with things like the roofs, the tiles? So if you have very unique and custom roofs, and by the way, with duplicating the floors, again, I usually hit D, hold V to snap to a particular vertex, hit Control D, hold V, and then we get our duplicate floor. And you can always, sometimes the floors are different, right? Sometimes the floors have portions of a room that are gone. So if that's the case, you can take out a section and then just essentially bridge across if need be. So find your kind of open edges. And again, if you keep these edges, this is why I like to keep my edges fluidly going through front to left to right, front to back, is that it allows you to easily bridge these things together. Oh, wrong edge here. I got a tiny edge there. Okay. Take this, and we'll bridge. There. Yeah, it looks like, again, there's kind of a weird little edge in here, so I might just clean that out. There. Yes. Yeah, so I didn't duplicate the windows yet, but again, it's the same thing. I could just kind of shift and drag this up, right? By the way, the same thing applies to doors. I usually will, kind of go into multi-cut. So I'll go down to the main floor. It's one of the reasons I don't actually put doors in initially, because I know oftentimes the floors kind of repeat. But the main difference is going to be the front door and maybe a couple of different windows on the main. So in that case, again, I would just multi-cut, control, middle click, then you can control B bevel. Again, I usually just leave this to one segment and scale it to the appropriate width. And then typically you can kind of shift drag this in. I usually delete this bottom poly here just because it can sometimes present an issue later on. And then again, we can create door framing around this. So I might just take these faces and essentially duplicate them. So I'll go to duplicate face. In this case, I'll keep it a separate object. I'll say duplicate. And then go to object mode and grab the duplicate. And then I can hit Control E extrude with a thickness. Go. Right, and then maybe I'll throw in multi-cut again, middle click, and then have another kind of little interior frame there. Control E extrude with the thickness. Yeah, again, if it extrudes down, I mean, if it's hidden, I don't necessarily mind, but usually I will delete the polys that are kind of not visible. So any polys that kind of want to be on the bottom here, I typically delete. If we're never actually going through the door frame, which is going to be the case with this project, I will also delete kind of any faces that are typically overlapping onto other surfaces like these interior. So it's just a little way to optimize, especially if you have tons of windows, tons of other parts of the building that we may never see. It can be useful. There we go. Let me just center this pivot. Right. Okay, so when it comes to roofs and roof lines, usually they're very simple in shape, very triangular, but sometimes there's shingles. If you are going to do shingles, you can either keep them very, very low poly, or let's say maybe the base of your building is a little bit simpler. What you can do is model them with a little bit more detail for mass duplication. So I usually kind of create sheets first. So I'll show you a couple of different styles. So let's say we just go to a single plane. And again, I'll make this relatively simple. Maybe make this like a 3x3. And I'll scale it way down just because of the size of scene I'm working on. So let's say we're doing kind of like the shingles here. They're kind of a bit squared and a little bit wonky, each one of them. We can extrude them so they have a thickness, okay? Again, if you're going really optimal, I would just literally have a flat cube so we could take out the excess edges. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift drag a copy and give it a little gap and then hit Shift D. Again, another way to do this is to use Edit Duplicate Special. That can be a little bit faster. But I'm going to just keep going here. So Control D or Shift and drag and then Shift D after that. So you kind of make like a sheet first. So I'll take this sheet of objects, shift, drag, or copy, and I want a bit of overlap, and I'll show you why in a second. And then we offset these like so. Select these and do the same thing, shift and drag. And then Control D, oops, sorry. Let's try that one more time. You got to be very careful because if you hit the wrong key or move too much in another direction, it kind of resets. So shifty, 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 shifty. By the way, if your camera acts up, just go to perspective, go to attributes, set your near clipping plane. I find 1 to 5 is usually a good value. Okay, so check it out. You got your sheet of shingles. And if we go to rotate, they should all rotate together, which is kind of nice. So I'm going to just double click on the rotate tool. I've got absolute or relative step snapping on. I'm going to just turn off the snapping for now. So that way I can get a very fine-tuned, subtle rotation, right? So this sheet alone, just to let you know, that's 10,000 polys. So that kind of thing can add up quickly, right? So that's why I'm saying if you wanted to, let's say, reduce your poly count, I'll show you the difference. So let's say if I go into here, I'm going to select these edges and just remove them, okay? So I'll shift, double click each of these loops, hit Control Backspace. Now, there's a really great trick. If I wanted to replace all these quickly, I'll just select everything, and the last one I'm going to select is the new leaner, lighter piece of mesh. If you go to Modify, Replace Objects, you can say Copy, Rotate, Scale, and I'm going to turn these to instances. So then when I hit Replace, these will all be updated and now have the much lighter, leaner mesh. So now if I go back in, I've got 2,000 faces versus 10, right? So I can have more of these. The only thing is I can't have maybe more unique shapes on each one of these. But what I can do with these, which is really interesting, is I like to do this. If I go into Bonus Tools under Modify, there's Randomize, Transform, Basic, and Advanced. I typically go to Advanced. So if we click on that, you can now have Randomize Rotation. So if you up this a little bit, and I will usually decide which axes. I think I'm facing kind of the right view, so it's a bit awkward, but let me just set this to 0. Yeah, I'll try each one of these at 0. Yeah, I think this is kind of the left to right kind of rotation, okay? So I might have a very, very small amount of that. And then let's turn up the other axis, Z. Yeah, this is the axis I want to work on. So yeah, I'll just turn on the range a little bit, just so we get very, very subtle, okay? Very subtle variations. And again, if you're going more like spooky, scary Halloween, right, you can up this rotation amount a little bit more. Or if you're looking for more dilapidated, broken down, right, this is the way to do it. So now if you take a look, right, it looks a lot rougher. Yeah. Again, the world is chaos. So if you have a roof, let's say I'm just going to put a basic one here. So I'll create, I could probably just start, I usually start with just super basic, almost two-dimensional shapes. So I use planes a lot. I'll go to Edge and just collapse the center, okay? Take a look at some of these houses, right? So they're very triangular sort of planes, triangular roof lines, I should say. Yeah, I'll take this shape, just rotate it. In this case, I do want step snap back on, so I'll set it to 90, rotate 90 degrees, and then just extrude this thing out. Set that to maybe 1,000 for now. Sure. Go. We'll start to kind of place this into the building. Okay, I'll just center this and tweak the scaling here. And sometimes too, you'll have a roof line that kind of just is sort of, let's take a look. It might be, I don't kind of have one set up quite like this, but just take a look at some of the other reference photos. Sometimes it's just like half the slope. It's not like a full peak. So what I mean is that literally this will be, oops. Yeah, we basically won't have this sort of half. What's going on with the object here? Maya being Maya, just totally like flipped out. Mesh display reverse? No? That's totally weird. I don't know what happened with that, so I'm going to leave it. But yeah, sometimes, like I said, it's basically just like half a peak. So yeah, let's try again here. Edge, collapse, center, and then I'll just move this vertex over. So it's basically like a half roof line, right? It rotates. And usually I want the roof line to be this. I want the roof line to sort of be hollow actually underneath. So it just depends on how you build things, but yeah, let's extend this out there. What I mean by that is I'll probably like delete the underside. You know, that's usually, I think, a little bit more useful. The other thing you could do, by the way, is also just extend this out. So if I could hit Control E extrude, just give this thing a small thickness. Oh my god, I think my extrusion is broken for some reason. Seems so weird. Maya, Waya. I don't know what's happening with it. It's very bizarre. Anyways, what you can do with this, I just want to show you this. So let's say if your roof line is like not perfectly straight or flat. The other thing is, you know, you could duplicate this, by the way, so you could shift drag a copy. This is going to get kind of slow as you go, but so let's say you had a big roof line. You can extend this. I basically usually combine this stuff at some point, so I'll just say combine into a sheet. And I'll show you the trick. So if you had a sloped roof, or if you have something like a Japanese pagoda, whatever, something like that, right? So these things have these kind of curved, arched roofs. The secret is basically having a lattice deformer, right? So let's get back to Maya for a second. Okay, I just had a crash. Mainly because I had combined a bunch of references. So what you can do if you have, instances. If you have a bunch of instances before merging them or combining them, you can go to converts instances to objects. So that will kind of prevent this kind of like doom loop cycle that was happening with Maya. Because basically each instance was trying to combine itself to every other instance. And so it was probably multiplying into the like millions of polys and creating all these weird dependency loops that essentially crash the software. So that's okay. I'm just kind of restructuring this thing, and I'm going to take these, do my little rotations. Sometimes, by the way, if they rotate as a group, you can just go in here and make sure that you're on object mode. Otherwise, they might, like I said, rotate together as a group. What I mean is like one big sheet. Okay, let me just go back into bonus tools, modify, randomize. Zero out that axis and set that one low. Okay, pretty good for a decrepit house. All right, so I'll combine these. Also, good idea to delete your history. Okay, so I'll do Alt-Shift-D, which will delete the history on that. So, like I was saying, if you have a curvature or a structure that's curved, the best thing to do is basically just go to Deform, Nonlinear. Deform. Where is it? Deform Lattice. And I usually like to go into the settings for this. So essentially, you have a number of divisions, X, Y, and Z. And if you hit Apply, you can kind of see where those divisions are. I think in this case, I just need... I don't need 5, which is the height, so I'll just set this to like 1 division there. Or I guess it has to be 2. Sorry, let's do that. Apply. And I'll undo and try it 5 by 2 by 5. And okay, we'll go to Apply. So now what happens is if you right-click on this and go to Lattice Points and grab, let's say, the corners, you should be able to kind of warp these, right, into whatever shape you need. Now, keep in mind, like I said, the original mesh doesn't have divisions. So if you want the divisions to be able to kind of curve a bit more naturally, they will need divisions internally inside the tiles. Now for that, you could try a, where is it? Mesh, not smooth, but mesh, edit mesh, add divisions. This is basically like adding divisions without smoothing, okay? So let me just undo this deformer. So if you feel like while testing out the divisions, you need actually more mesh detail, a quick way to do it is to just go to edit mesh, add divisions. Okay, and then I'll delete history. Then I'll hit apply to this and there. So let's say if we grab these, for example, and pull them up, right? Maybe rotate them a bit. So you can get curvature on your roof and have different angles and things of that nature. Also, if you're trying to, let's say, use this as a kind of wall, let me rotate this upwards. Again, I want to be using my kind of handy tool, the mirror tool. So I'll just flip this up in a particular direction. So if you go to mesh mirror, you can use this, right, to kind of go around an angle, and you get these kind of nice kind of corner turns. So again, I'll turn on the, in this case, it's probably the rotate Y, or maybe rotate Z, there, 45 degrees, right? And then you can kind of slide this over to, let's say, your far edge. So if you needed something like that to wrap around a corner, that's another way to get that to happen, okay? And I believe this is still relatively low poly. I mean, that's only about 20,000 polys. Just one final note about lattices is that they actually act very angularly. So if you want there to be more curvature to the shape, you want to make sure you go into the attribute for the FFD. That's a freeform deformer lattice. And make sure you turn off local, and then you'll get this more fluid, more curved, right, sort of space. So this way, again, if you're doing like very complex curved roofs and you want them to taper in or flare out, you can do that actually with much greater ease by turning off that local option, right? And then you can get these like, yeah, very kind of ornate and detailed surfaces, okay?